This was the biggest race in LA County, obviously. District Attorney George Gascon, and he's going to a runoff too, likely against Nathan Hochman, former U.S. Assistant Attorney General, among other things. Right now, 55% of the vote in, and Gascon's at 21.4%. Nathan Hochman at 17.7, John Hatami at 13.4, everybody else in single digits. So let's get Nathan Hochman on to talk about what's happening. Nathan, welcome, and I guess limited congratulations since we still got another 45% of the vote. How are you feeling?
Feeling very good, John, and thank you very much for having me on. Cautiously optimistic. And that's because the vote has come in where I'm in the top two, consistent with our polling results. But those polling results also showed one more thing, that when I get to the general election in a head-to-head matchup with George Gascon, I can beat him by 25 points. That's because I will be able to unify the over 75% of people who rejected George Gascon in this primary. And they are Republicans, they are Democrats, they are independents. There are people from every demographic, geographic, and political divide in this county. And they all feel less safe today than they did when George Gascon took office. They all fear for their safety, for their children's safety, for their parents' safety. And they are looking at George Gascon's pro-criminal blanket policies and saying, no way. We want to reject that and vote in someone like myself with 34 years of criminal justice experience as a prosecutor, a U.S. Assistant Attorney General, and a defense counsel.
What kind of campaign do you expect from Gascon? I have no idea what he would run on with his record in this climate. What do you think he's going, or is he going to come after you personally?
He's coming after me personally because he can't run on his record. If he wants to actually compare our experience, I've prosecuted over 100 criminal cases for narcotics traffickers, gang members, international money launderers, environmental criminals. How many cases has Gascon personally prosecuted? 0. I've defended over 200 cases. He's defended 0. So he can't come after me on the experiential level. The only thing he can say is that I'm a Democrat. He used to be a Republican. I'm running as an independent, by the way, in this race, and make this all about politics. But what I have found is that the old adage that when criminals rob you, they don't ask for your party affiliation. Similarly, when voters vote on who's going to keep them safe, they're going to put politics to the side because they want their DA to be independent, making the key decisions on someone's liberty based on only two things, the facts and the law. Gascon has introduced his leftist political ideology as part of the mix, and that's why we have the safety issues we have today. I will remove politics from the DA's office and go back to those two things, the facts and the law, holding people accountable.
Talk about the first things that you would dismantle if you get into office to replace Gascon. I mean, we know about he had 9 directives that he enacted on day one. They're similar to executive orders that a president would have. Talk about some of the stuff you're going to get rid of right off the bat.
Certainly. Let's start with sort of the easiest 3, the lowest hanging fruit. First, we're going to hold people accountable if they steal just under $950. We're not going to pretend that crime doesn't exist. Second, we're going to go back to the facts and the law to deal with enhancements, whether it's gun enhancements, gang enhancements, the 3 strikes law. These are, again, tools in a prosecutor's arsenal that the state legislature has given the prosecutors to actually look at the facts and the law in each and every case and not determine ahead of time, like Gascon has, that just certain criminals and certain crimes won't be prosecuted no matter what the facts. And then also go back to protecting and defending victims. We will start sending prosecutors again to parole hearings where victim families are confronting their murderers who want to get out of prison early. Gascon has prohibited prosecutors from going ahead and accompanying these families. I would go back on day one to reinstituting that policy to have prosecutors at every parole hearing with victim families.
Tell me what made you run. Was there one incident involving Gascon or one particular news story that made you want to jump into this race?
You know, it's interesting. What made me probably jump into this race more than anything is I met parents whose children had tragically died from fentanyl poisoning. One particular set of parents who had a 16-year-old at a local high school, a straight-A student, And unfortunately, he went on Snapchat, got an Oxycontin tablet, one of those counterfeit tablets, that he didn't know had 10 milligrams of fentanyl in it, 2 of which will kill you in 2 minutes. When the parents went to wake him up the next day, he had died. And when I looked at the law and what was happening, Gascon refuses to hold the fentanyl poisoners as murderers and try them for the murders they have committed, knowing murders, knowing that the fentanyl was going to kill these people, and they didn't bother to tell them that the fentanyl was in these counterfeit tablets. And then I looked at the fact that Gascon wouldn't even give warnings to convicted fentanyl dealers that if they do the crime again and someone dies, they will be held for murder. And I thought, look, I'm going to live in this county. I want to live in this county. I've lived here for 60 years, married for 30, raised 3 kids here in L.A. County, and I refuse to leave. And if you're not going to leave, you got to fight for what you love. And I decided, look, I will replace Gascon, fight for what I love, and become the next district attorney, holding people accountable for their actions.
I don't think a lot of people realize how many laws he chose not to follow, how many enhancements that he chose not to charge criminals with, things that were on the books that even in left-wing Democratic California, the majority consensus was, yes, these are crimes. Yes, these should be enhancements. Yes, these should be the jail terms. There wasn't really a dispute about that, or those laws would have been overturned. But he just simply was ignoring the law all these years.
Oh, it's worse than that. Gascon used to boast on his website till he realized it was probably a stupid thing to do, that he had saved violent and serious offenders and criminals over 10,000 years of prison time because he refused to charge certain crimes for which the evidence so warranted.
He actually
10,000 years.
He actually had that on his website?
He thought it was a badge of honor. It's a badge of honor if you're a defense counsel that you've saved your client that much time, but it's almost a badge of shame for a prosecutor to be boasting how much time he has saved criminal defendants by not bringing charges that are supported by the evidence. And that just shows his warped view, his social experiment that he's conducting on to our detriment, and has been for the last several years, where he thinks that he can release violent and serious offenders before they serve their full sentences, not prosecute them to the full extent of the law, yet somehow we're going to be more safe. The statistics show that he is absolutely wrong in this respect.
Can you hang on for another segment?
Certainly.
You have time? Okay, Nathan Hochman. Right now, he is number 2 in the race for district attorney, which means he would go for a runoff if it holds against Gascon. Gascon really had a terrible outing, only 21% as an incumbent. Nathan Hochman at 17.7, Hatami at 13.4, and we got about 55% of the vote in, so everyone else single digits. More with Nathan Hochman coming up.
You're listening to John Kobylt on demand from KFI AM 640.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with Nathan Hochman, who at the moment is in second place in the race for LA County DA. Gascon has 21.4%, a terrible number for an incumbent. Hochman at 17.7, John Hatami at 13.4, everyone else in single digits, 55% of the vote in, which means 45% is still to come. And if you look at it one way, you had almost 79% of the county voting against Gascon for someone else. And let's continue with Nathan Hochman here. Nathan, I mean, there was just an unwieldy amount of challengers, and there were other good candidates, but you did obviously stuck out because you're up there at 17.7. How did you differentiate your candidacy from some of the other deputy DAs that were running? You all were saying similar things, but I noticed you had the best fundraising and you had the best media presence. You were out early and often on television. So talk about how you structured the campaign and why you got to a place that the rest of Gascon's opponents couldn't get to.
Certainly. So what I had to do is show voters 4 different things which I alone was able to do in order not only to be a very good DA and replace Gascon, but to beat him in the process. The first is you had to contrast Gascon's 0 criminal experience against my 34 years of prosecutorial and defense criminal justice experience. The second is leadership. I've led a U.S. Department of Justice's litigating division after a presidential appointment by President George W. Bush a unanimous U.S. Senate confirmation with 350 lawyers and a $100 million budget doing cases all over the nation. No other candidate could claim that type of leadership experience, as well as being the president of the LA City Ethics Commission and the co-founder of the LA Sheriff's Foundation. Again, no other candidate could claim to be a defense counsel, a prosecutor, heading up a litigating division, heading up the Ethics Commission, the Sheriff's Foundation, and two major international law firms' government investigations practice. The third thing is endorsements. Some of the key endorsements in the race I was able to get, which is Steve Cooley, the former LA DA, and 5 LA U.S. attorneys. No one else had endorsements of these key law enforcement officials. And then finally, it was the fundraising. We were able to raise over $2.1 million, which is a record. Twice as much, 3 times as much, 4 times as much as any of the other candidates. And what we were able to do is raise it from not just Republicans, but half of it came from Democrats and independents as well. And what we were able to also do is raise it across the entire county. Every demographic, every political divide, we were able to convince that not only would I be a good DA, but I could beat George Gascon. Because quite candidly, if you can't go toe-to-toe with not just Gascon, but George Soros, you are going to lose the race. And I was able to show voters and donors that I will be able to match George Soros/Gascon dollar for dollar and get my message out to voters and put Gascon's record on trial, prosecute the prosecutor, and use as my witnesses real-life victims of Gascon's policies in order for jurors, which will be the voters, to render their verdict on November 5th, throw Gascon out of office, and elect a new DA, Nathan Hochman.
You must have talked to a lot of victims during the campaign, and that must have been difficult to see the kind of damage that Gascon did, not only letting the criminals run amok, creating the victims, but his terrible treatment of victims and victims' families after the crime. Talk about what you encountered in talking to these kinds of people.
It was, in some ways, it was brutal because, again, the prosecutor should be the champion of victims, to be the one that goes into court and stands up for those victims because the defendant has his own defense counsel. Nobody else is representing the victims other than the DA, and the DA was failing them. This is mothers, for instance, that of the El Monte police officers, that Gascon's policy directly related to a convicted killer being in a hotel room, shooting their sons dead. They should never have been there if Gascon hadn't had a policy instructing his prosecutors not to file strike offenses. I talked to a jeweler in Pasadena who was smashed and grabbed and pepper sprayed and watched 20 years of his life's work go up literally in ashes as they were stealing everything in the store, and he's never been able to replace it. I've talked to, again, parents of fentanyl, of children who have died from fentanyl poisoning that look to the DA's office to bring justice and have seen the DA not even take their meetings. So I look at this enormous frustration throughout our entire county, and I say enough is enough. And they tell me enough is enough. Get this guy out of office. Work your tush off to reach all these voters, and I did. And now we're in a position right now to go after Gascon in the November 5th general election, put his record on trial, and get the verdict rendered against him. Goodbye.
All right, Nathan. Well, congratulations. Wish you luck, assuming that the lead holds. And welcome anytime to come on during the campaign, as often as you want, because we have to get Gascon out of here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, John. And again, keep doing the good work you're doing.
All right, Nathan Hochman, thank you.